we were the ones who had the honor of leading the community of Kutztown through this planning process. It's been an absolute pleasure. We had an awful lot of input from the public. We are very grateful to the public and all of you for all of your input, because we believe that the plan then reflects your thoughts and your hopes for the future of Kutztown. I would most especially like to recognize and thank the members of the task force. So the members of the task force who are here tonight, could please stand up. We would like to thank you. And these are the people who really spent a lot of time with us, really working through the plan, really making sure that we were on track, paying attention to what you wanted, and making sure that the outcome of it was what the community wanted to see. As you know, I'm not going to go through the whole process, you've heard it many times, but as you know, we were tasked with really looking at housing here in Kutztown and improving the downtown business district. So those are the two things that we focused on in a specific area in the borough, and that's where we spent most of our time. I also want to make sure everyone knows, and you'll see on your handout, that the full plan will be on the website tomorrow. The entire plan will be on the website tomorrow. I'm going to actually hand the microphone over now to my colleague, Shannon Calori. Shannon is going to walk you through some of the meat, really, the meat of the plan. And then Jessica is going to speak, and then Amanda is going to talk about next steps. And then afterwards, we will all be here in the back mingling about. We'll be here to answer your questions. If you have any specific questions, talk about those. And we're also going to be asking you to help in the next steps. So with that.
Good evening. I'm Shannon Calori. I'm the Director of Planning of Hailstone Economic. And to reiterate what Sarah said, it's been a pleasure working on this plan and getting all the input from all of you here and many more members throughout the community. We wanted to just talk you through the planning process. So there's been a lot going on over the past 6 months. We created a task force. We had 2 community meetings prior to tonight's meeting. We did an online survey where we collected a lot of great information from the community. We had stakeholder interviews where we did a lot of one-on-one interviews with members of the community. We had meetings with KCP as well as borough staff. We looked carefully at the zoning ordinance and other ordinances that impact both housing and business development in the borough. We did an asset inventory, and so within our designated area that we were studying, we looked at all of the buildings to try to understand what was going on with the businesses and rentals and vacancies, so that we had a lot of great data. We did a building assessment to kind of look at opportunities for businesses in the borough. And then we did an economic and market analysis, a needs, a trends assessment, and an opportunities assessment. And all of that data is available as part of the plan. So out of this planning process, with once again all of your input, we came up with 5 strategic areas to focus on moving forward. Housing, economic development, planning and codes, complete streets, and marketing. And I hope all of you took one of the handouts that identified some of the key strategies, and there's a lot of details behind all the strategies, but the key strategies that fall under each one of these strategic areas. So the first one I want to talk about is housing. So one of the major concerns, and one of the biggest reasons why we were brought on board, is that there's a concern that there's a lot of student rental vacancies in the borough. And we looked at why that might be, and there's a decrease in the number of students at Kutztown University. There's an increase in student housing opportunities in terms of large-scale developments. And so over the years, there's been a perception as well as somewhat of a reality of vacancies for student rentals. And we also found out through our market analysis that there's demand for market rate rentals or rentals for families and for non-students. And so one of the things we spent a lot of time thinking about is how can we encourage landlords to take their student rentals and turn them into rentals that are available for non-students, whether it's families or it's young or seniors, because there's a demand for that type of rental housing in the community. And so the plan came up with a number of incentives to encourage landlords to do this, to think through these opportunities. One thing to note about this plan is at this point, this is a plan that we put forward, and as part of our next steps is we're going to work through subcommittees to finalize all of these. These are merely suggestions, strong recommendations based on best practices out there, based on our experience, based on the input from the community. They're not necessarily final decisions, but they're, I think, good things to think about now moving forward with the subcommittees. So some of the incentives we're thinking about is, one of the concerns we heard is that landlords, if they lose their student housing or if they turn their student housing into non-student housing, that they'll never be able to rent to students again, because there's a law in place that says that there's a limited number of, or you can only have student housing within a certain distance of other student housing in certain districts in the borough. So that's kind of a lot to think through. But as a landlord, they worry about renting to non-students and then never being able to rent to students again, let's say the market demands more student housing. So for example, one of our incentives, or one of the things that we want the subcommittee, the housing subcommittee, to think through is, would we allow a landlord to rent to non-students for up to 5 years to get them to try it out, and then allow them to rent to students again if they decide that that's the better market for them. So giving them a little bit of leeway to try out renting to non-students. And we think, our theory is based on, once again, best practice information, is that they're going to like renting to non-students because there's going to be less turnover, therefore less need to repaint and to recarpet. They might have a family in there for 5 years, and so they're going to get to know their tenant, that sort of thing. So this is just one example of an incentive we put forward in our plan to encourage landlords to think about perhaps renting to non-students. We also want to look at inspections and code enforcement so that we are able to hold landlords of student rentals as well as non-student rentals more accountable to improve the look of the properties, to include the health and safety of the properties. And so we think it's really important to make sure that we have the resources in place as well as the laws in place to hold people accountable to a standard that the borough is looking for in their housing properties. We also want to partner with landlords to promote compliance with borough policies and new opportunities. And so one way to gain compliance is to really have a partnership with the landlords. So to meet with them, to talk about their concerns, to talk about the burdens potentially placed on them, to talk about how to make sure that they're able to comply with what the borough is putting in place. And so it's more of a partnership than it is a borough trying to punish any landlord. We want to work with them to make sure that their tenants are living in safe and healthy places, and they're wanting and able to work with the borough. The second area that we focused on is economic development. And so there's a lot of great things going on along Main Street, but there's opportunity for business development. So one of the things we want to do is figure out how we can work with local business owners to keep them here. And so there's several ways that you can do that. One is to, on a regular basis, meet with the business owners to see what their concerns are, to see what their long-term plans are, to figure out how we can keep them in their space, to talk about the types of customers that are coming or the types of customers they wish were coming, so we can help develop a marketing strategy to get the customer base here to support the businesses that are already here and making Kutztown a great place to be. We also want to recruit new businesses to look at what is missing. And so we did, one of the survey questions, or several survey questions in our online survey, asked people about what types of businesses would they like to see in the community. We also did some market research to see what was missing in your community, what you're going elsewhere to buy. And so we want to then use that data and strategically recruit businesses to come to Kutztown. We want to tie that into identifying specific spaces for them. So we can look at vacant spaces or spaces that might become vacant in the future and help and coach businesses on how to connect, the right type of business with the available space and kind of connect the dots. And so we're able to bring the businesses into the community. We also want to promote regional connectivity. So none of these municipalities are living in a vacuum. People are taking advantage and need to be taking advantage of all the resources around the region. And so once again, through a marketing campaign and through understanding what we are able in Kutztown to share with other municipalities and vice versa, we want to promote regional connectivity so that if someone is coming to Kutztown for something during the day, that they know, what might be going on next door at night, and they can hit both at the same time. And then we also want to continue to develop and launch the Arts and Innovation Incubator. There's a group of volunteers who have come together to create this incredible idea to promote arts and culinary work, to try to get people to start up businesses and to come together and promote arts and food within the borough. So it's a great concept, and we think it's a great project for Kutztown to continue promoting and moving forward, identifying space and actually getting it launched. So that's another piece, a strong piece of the economic development plan. And the next thing is planning and code. So kind of going along with both economic development as well as housing is how can we support all of this stuff to happen by making it easier to work with the laws and the bureaucracy within the borough of Kutztown. So one of the things we did was look at the zoning ordinance and identified some ways that the zoning ordinance can be changed or amended to promote economic development goals. So for example, sometimes the parking requirements of the zoning ordinance can limit the size or the type of restaurant or retail store that comes into the borough, because for every seat in a restaurant you might need to have, or for every 5 seats you might need to have 1 parking space, that sort of thing. So what we want to do is amend the ordinance to encourage or make sure we're at least not discouraging businesses from coming into the borough, because it's a great idea for the business. We think people want to go to the business, but they can't open because they don't meet, for example, the parking requirements. And so there's some ideas around how we can amend the zoning ordinance to make economic development a little bit easier on potential applicants. We also want to streamline the land development and permitting approval process. You don't do this type of stuff every day. It's very complicated and complex. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're able to walk people through the permitting and land development process as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Every minute a business isn't open is money for the landlord, as well as every time applicants have to go to a meeting, they're potentially bringing engineers and attorneys with them, and that's an added expense. So we want to make sure that as a borough, we're walking people through, hand-holding the process, explaining the process so that it's as quick and as efficient as possible. We also want to consider decreasing building permit requirements. And once again, this is an example of a potential best practice that we put out there that will go through, I think, for further review in the planning and code section. But in order to do any, we talk about wanting landlords to potentially change who they're renting to, from students to families. And as part of that process, they might want to upgrade some of the plumbing or the fixtures in their house. In order to do that, they have to pull a building permit, because in the borough of Kutztown, you have to pull a building permit for anything you're doing residentially in your house, any sort of residential alterations. It's pretty restrictive, and there's many reasons why you want to be restricted. There's a lot of safety things to think about in terms of, having Uncle Joe do your electrical wiring versus a certified electrician, that sort of thing. But what we want to do is think through how we can potentially decrease some of the building code or building permitting requirements, so that we're encouraging people to make these upgrades to their houses to also then deconvert and offer housing opportunities to families or non-students. We also want to make sure the Community Development Office, as well as the Kutztown Community Partnership, has the capacity. A lot of the details behind all this, we've assigned in the plan, we've assigned leads. And a lot of the leads ended up in the lap of the Community Development Office as well as KCP. And so in order to get this work done, in order to do this better, we want to make sure that both offices have the capacity to get it done. And so, we've identified things they can do to make sure that, one thing to give someone a list of 10 things to do, another, we have to make sure they have the capacity or the time and the commitment to make it happen. I think both offices absolutely are committed to making it happen. It's making sure the borough and the community and all the potential partners are behind them to support them to making sure the capacity is there. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to introduce Complete Streets.
Good evening, I'm Jessica Drystad, and I'm the Director of Research and Communications for Hailstone Economic. I'm going to talk about the last two strategic areas of the plan, which are complete streets and marketing, and then also talk about the structure for implementation. At this point, you might be thinking, wow, that's a whole lot of stuff that's going to happen. So I just wanted to let you know that this isn't all going to happen in the next week or the next month or the next year. The plan phases everything over the next 10 years. So there are some things that we're going to talk about tonight that can be done really easily and quickly, but there's other things like the Complete Streets area that are more longer-term projects. So these are things that require more planning and investment that really need that time and attention to be done well. So Complete Streets in particular is a longer range strategy of the plan. Complete Streets might be a new term to some of you, so I'll start off by explaining what that means. To summarize, it basically means connection and movement. If you think about the way that planning has been done over the past several decades, a lot of it has been centered on the automobile and on cars and buses and moving vehicles. So the unintended consequence of that is that sometimes people will come to a community, they'll go exactly to the place that they want to go, they'll park their car, they'll go in, they'll get back in their car, and they'll leave. Or even worse, they might just drive through the community and not even stop and just head to their next destination. A Complete Streets policy invites people to come and stay and linger and explore. It really ties into other components of the plan, especially marketing, which I'll talk about next, and supports the goal of improving the businesses, expanding the customer base, and increasing the number of permanent residents in the borough. We want people to come to the borough, explore, and fall in love with the borough, and then want to stay and to be a part of it on a deeper level. So the Complete Streets policy looks at all modes of transportation. So it doesn't put the car at the center of transportation planning. It sees the car as part of a bigger picture that also includes people who walk, people in wheelchairs, baby strollers, skateboarders, bicyclists, and any other mode of transportation that you can think of. So it's a very holistic approach to looking at the way that people move throughout a community. In addition to focusing on various modes of transportation, the Complete Streets approach also makes it easy for people to explore and to linger. So it includes things like lighting and park benches and trails and sidewalks and other things that make it easier for people to move around the borough, regardless of their mode of transportation. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a long-term strategy that we won't see immediate results on because it does require additional planning. But we thought it's very important for the borough, knowing that you are dedicated to supporting, creating opportunities for people who use different modes of transportation. So the first part of this is to adopt the Complete Streets policy. And luckily, there's lots of examples where this has been done in other communities. So we'll provide resources. We provided resources in the plan to help the borough start on that next step. Also, to create a comprehensive transportation plan. Transportation is something that came up several times throughout this planning process, and we know it's important to this borough. We took a holistic approach to developing the plan, but we weren't able to do a comprehensive or the level of detail for transportation planning that it really deserves to be done well. So we're recommending that as another step going forward. And the next is to promote people coming to the borough as well as people in the borough moving about within the borough or perhaps to other communities through public transportation. The last strategic area of the plan is marketing. As you know, Kutztown is a pretty amazing place. You have lots of great events and amenities and services and businesses. So we want to let people know about it in a very coordinated way. We have Kutztown Community Partnership, the University, the Chamber of Commerce, the Americana region, and others currently promoting Kutztown along with their other responsibilities. What we're recommending as part of this plan is that all of those organizations that are marketing the borough work together to pool their resources and their messaging to have a coordinated message and opportunities for people to learn about the borough and how they can come and things they can do here. So we've, as part of the plan, we've created some materials to help you get started in thinking about how you might position or talk about the borough to people who aren't familiar with it yet and would like to learn more. Also, we'll be connecting the businesses and organizations to promote the assets and opportunities throughout the borough. So right now you might hear about something from one of those entities I mentioned. You might see it in the newspaper or see it on television. But we're hoping that it's not sporadic like that there's a real consistent effort that has continuity in the messaging. Also, promote activity and mobility within the borough to promote traffic flow, which might include having better signage. So when you have all those people come to the borough, for example, for the Kutztown Folk Festival, it would be great if some of that traffic then connected down to the downtown. So we want to make sure people know about all the opportunities here in the borough, not just the things that they're already familiar with. And signage is one way that can happen. And last, leverage the networking capacity of Kutztown University to create opportunities for learning, organize community and volunteer activities, and promote inclusion. The university is obviously a very important partner in this whole effort, and they're key to the marketing of the borough. So how's all this going to get done? As we mentioned earlier, we've had a really amazing task force that's been committed to this project since last summer and working with us in developing this plan. Going forward, that task force, their job is done. They've helped, worked with us to create the plan. So we're going to have a new structure that will work with implementation. A lot of the same people will be involved, and in addition to that, there will be opportunities for you to be involved and others in the community. So the Borough Council will ultimately be responsible for overseeing the implementation of the plan. And then, but the real work, the day-to-day work, is a lot of it, as Shannon mentioned, will be happening in the borough office as well as KCP office. But there will be committees in place for each of those 5 strategic areas that will bring together people who are really passionate about that topic or who are already working in that area so that they can communicate on a regular basis, plan together, and look at the different areas of the plan and start talking about and working through how that's actually going to happen. So as I mentioned, there are the 5 committees. Each of those committees will have a person who is the coordinator or facilitator of that committee. Those 5, it's really important because all the components of the plan, they all work together. If we only focus on one area and they're not connecting or talking, then it won't be as effective. So it's really important for those 5 committees, even though they're meeting separately and doing their own work, to be coordinated in some way. So you see at the center there will be a task force. And the task force is going to include the chairs of each of those 5 committees. so that they're meeting on a regular basis to talk about what happened, what they're working on, how they can work together, where they are with things. So it's an accountability system, but also a way to strengthen the impact of the plan. The task force will also include a representative from the borough office, from the community development office, as well as from KCP, because they're key partners in the implementation. And finally, the task force will include the members of the Borough Community Development Committee. One of those members is here, Amanda Brownbush, and she is going to talk to you about the next steps.
Good evening. Good evening. We're all still awake, right? Okay, good. My name is Amanda Radbush. I am on Borough Council. I also have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Community Development and Public Safety Committee for Borough Council. And because of that wonderful hat that I get to wear, I now also get to chair the task force. So that's why I'm here. I'm super excited about this plan, and I really, really love that we basically passed the baton, right? So Hailstone Economic did a heck of a lot of work on this plan. They provided us with guidance and different ways that we can try to move forward to achieve different things. We don't have to do everything that's in the plan. We can do everything that's in the plan. That's up to us. This is where our part starts. Thank you. This is where our part starts. So, you know, at my job, I do something very similar to this, and what I always tell my staff, when I tell my kids, when you look at something this large, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. You don't look at the rest of the elephant. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at this plan, and I'm figuring out which bite, not just me, the task force, we're figuring out which bites are we taking, and how can we move certain things forward to continually improve upon a borough that's already fantastic. So I'm very, very excited about this. That was not my slide though. So we have the 5 new subcommittees, which is a great opportunity for anybody who has any sort of interest in any of those topics to volunteer. Do you need to be a housing expert to volunteer on the housing subcommittee? No. In fact, it'd probably be beneficial if you have an interest in housing, but you're not a housing expert, to go and have your voice heard, show your perspective, because a lot of us who work in those fields can get dredged down in the details and will miss some other storylines that are going on. So if there's anything that you might even be slightly interested in, you don't need to have a PhD in planning and codes to come volunteer on the subcommittee for planning and codes. You just need to have an interest in it. We'd love to hear from you. The full plan and updates on what we're doing are going to be on our website, the kutztownplan.com. And because I'm me, because I like to talk, we will be having periodic updates of movement on the plan at our borough council meetings. I'm planning on trying to get our task force together to start identifying how we're going to work together in the best way possible, and start maybe identifying some priorities for our subcommittees sometime in the next month. So, you know, those of you who are part of that, expect to hear from me. And we will be acting on this plan at Borough Council to make sure that we have enough folks on Borough Council who are supporting the plan in its idea. Not, again, necessarily every single portion of the plan, just holistically, are we moving forward with this or not? So, is there anything else I'm supposed to talk about? No? Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Oh, so I guess I'm closing the party out. If you're interested in signing for any subcommittees, or you may be interested but you're not sure, and you want to talk to any one of the 4 of us, and I'm sure there are other representatives from the borough here as well who'd be willing to chat, we'll be in the back to help sign up, answer any questions, and thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it.